Well, we are.
We both have very interesting pattern shirts for this one.
Yeah. It's that I think you should leave sketch. Have you seen that?
Dan Flash has got a new shirt in today that's $450.
What? Because the pattern's so complicated, you idiot!
Welcome to Mastering the Game.
I'm Seth.
I'm Shane, and today
Oh boy.
we're talking about.
It's gonna be a good one.
We're talking about DMing gods for your PC worshippers or otherwise,
Or others, yeah.
But yeah, particularly divine beings. Playing them for your players.
Oof.
And how to do such a thing with panache. And also sensitivity, I guess, would be a way of thinking about it.
Man, that's a big question. That is a big question. I've seen it done a lot. I feel like I've seen it done a few different ways. Man. I think like one thing that's
What's the worst way you've seen it done?
Oh boy, the worst way I've seen it done.
You don't have to name names, but you can describe the scenario.
I think the worst way I've seen it done is that like they don't personally, I don't like when gods are not portrayed with like a certain level of gravitas.
Yeah.
Like they when they're kind of like I don't know, like I feel like it's like to me, right? Even in a world where there's many gods and they're all real, right? Like, unless you're in one of those, oh God, there's a very specific type of deity system, and it's where there's like a god of archways, and there's like a god of like everything is imbued. It's like is it Taoism, where like everything is a god, everything is divinity, right? Like there's like a god of this tiny stretch of the river, like you know what I mean? It's like a very minor deity that like you could stab in the face and it would die, but like it's still a god, unless like that is your vibe that you're going for, right? Which is not most D&D settings that I've experienced with, or that are published in settings and stuff. Yeah, right. Most of them are like, nope, the gods are big and powerful and they fuck shit up. Yeah. There should be a level of, like, it should be a pretty rare event, and it should have a certain level of impact. Yeah. That's just my take on it. I don't know.
I think, I'm in massive agreement, but I think it's just because, like, for me, like, that's the significance of a god. But I do think, like, I guess if you have a setting where it's, like, you're doing a really specific take on divinity, and that's your take, is that it's, like, not that big a deal, then that's a whole thing, right? Yeah. Then that's your premise, and now maybe all your players are also gods or something like that. Yeah. Maybe that's what you're working with. Yeah. But outside of that, in, like, a D&D Faerun adjacent setting, your gods should be huge in their presence, in their vibes. You know, they should have weight to what they are, because otherwise you lose impact, right?
Yes. Even their harbingers, like their servants, the things that are adjacent to them should be like big, generally speaking, unless it's like but like, they don't have to be like cataclysm-inducing powerful. Yeah. But like it should be important when they arrive. Like they should make a splash, right? Yeah. Whether it's like a harbinger of one of the gods, or whether it is a god in avatar form or what have you. I feel right that they should be, they should again make a splash. They should make an impact. Portraying them, I think, is really interesting. Because like it depends so much on like what you're going for, right? Yeah. Like I think that depending on the god, right, they could be portrayed as like a lot of different things. Like there are some gods that are like, I don't know, like who was I feel like a good portrayal, even though he wasn't a god, like in media, that I felt like was actually like what a god would be like, was like Thanos, because he's just like so singularly purposed, and like he was like, there was no persuading him, there was no, you couldn't make a case, right? There was like, he didn't care, like he was so driven by a purpose, like whether you agree with his purpose or all that we could talk about that forever. Sure. But like I think like at least like the elements of a god that to me maybe like they're like, why would they ever listen to anybody else?
They wouldn't listen to anybody. That's very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. That it's like, they're not going to be persuaded away from what their thing is. Right? Yeah, like that's such a kind of fundamental element, because God has like decided in some capacity. Elbor is a really specific kind of scenario, but in some capacity, gods have decided how the world works.
Yes.
And so they have to like believe in it,
Yeah.
right? They have to be like pretty resolute that that's the deal, you know? And I think that's a major element of them. With the exception of, and I think that maybe is like in D&D where the PC comes in, is it's like the PC has the opportunity to interface with the gods somehow, right?
Yeah.
So that can be in the form of like maybe moving them a needle, or moving the needle of their
and that
scope of things.
I agree
right?
with that. Yeah, like I agree with that. Like Kellic had a big impact on Famir and Zachariel, right? Which I think, and again, like that's kind of going back to a theme that I think we talked on it was last episode, maybe the one before that. But you had mentioned something. It was like, why is our story happening now, right?
Yeah,
the story in Elbor, like the cycle of Elbor has happened multiple times. Why are we telling this one?
Why is this cycle?
And it's
the
like,
big one?
because it's different. Because something different is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same old. And so same with like that conceit also exists, right? For, divine PCs, like in some way, right? And maybe the god doesn't necessarily have to change, but I think like the PC or like something has to give in that scenario, right? Either the PC is disillusioned with their god, they're maybe reaffirmed because of something that they do, or the PC is able to, like you said, kind of move the needle a little bit, right? And affect the choice. And that also that needs to feel earned. It needs to feel like it happened. I mean, like like Zachariel made the choice he made at the end of the campaign because it was the end of the campaign and it had been earned. Like it was earned by Kellic over a very long period of time, over a lot of conversations, over a lot of prayers, over a lot of whispered pleas,
and
right?
Gestures of fealty and There's that conversation that Flynn and Kellic have on the boat on the way to like one of the Venville Rise, maybe, where we're on the boat and he's like, "Wait, you get all these powers for free?" And Kellic is like, "No, it ain't for free.
Yeah.
I do this so much to show them that it's worth it, right?" And that is that sort of like building up that credit, so that at the end of the thing,
like there's a moment that's earned there, right? Like where it's like, and in that particular case, I suppose is also maybe slightly different because it's like, well, he's only been a god for 30 years.
A little bit.
You know what I mean? Like he still remembers humanity, which again, it's setting dependent, I think, in a lot of ways. Maybe I'm going to walk back my own freaking rules here. But, in that respect, I was like, well, like one, you want the PC's relationship with the god to matter, right? Two, what story you were trying to tell. Like this was a story about gods and the decisions that they make.
Yeah.
And so like if we want to tell that story, right, then like the PC should be able to nudge that needle one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
And so like, you guys, did you get Zachariel to like fight Edriel? No, but you got him to interfere. Right. To demonstrate but in a way you turned his own preachings against him, right? Which was this idea of like free will, you got to let people decide. You guys did this because they interfered too much, so are you going to interfere with what we're doing right now?
Yeah.
And you kind of reminded him of that in so many respects.
Yeah.
And because of all the work that Kellic had done, his opinion, right, his worship, his calling out of that mattered in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what leads to this decision. But yeah, I think that like that kinds of that's
interesting because I don't like, so part of the reason that Kellic is Kellic, right, was because like going into the beginning of our show, Ethan was like, the backdrop is this religious war. And I was like, okay, cool. I want to play a cleric for a myriad reasons. And one of the reasons was I knew the party was going to need a healer. And I was like, I'll take that on. I'll be that. So everybody can do other more sexy things if they want. And then, of course, Kellic's pretty fucking sexy.
He was fucking sexy.
He's pretty sexy.
He was sexy and pretty. It was pretty good. He was pretty solid. It was pretty good.
Which I was not, that was a pleasant surprise. But outside of that, I was like, okay, clerics get to have this really unique relationship with the gods, so I'll put them right in the middle. Like, Ethan was like, we're going to start right in the middle of the war, right in the middle of the battle lines. And I was like, well, what if Kellic is in the middle of the gods too, right? If there's like some element of that, and that was part of the design. And but if I were to play a cleric in another campaign where maybe there's a little more stasis in the divine architecture of things, right? Maybe that would be a less direct, intimate relationship with the gods than Kellic had, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, because I do think, like, as a DM, if I have a player who is a religious character, I'm going to want them to have some kind of special interaction. And that could be about what this was, where it's like kind of like a face-to-face thing, or it could be that just their relationship with the divine changes who they are throughout the journey, I guess, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all up to, right? That's a big part of the communication that happens at the beginning, right? It's like, okay, like, what kind of story do we want to tell? Like, is this a cleric who is, you know, who is upset with their god,
right?
Who is angry, right, because of something that they view as an injustice that was done against them. I mean, that's a you know, a theme that I've seen and heard of that people want to explore.
Yeah.
You know, I've had players who were like, I just want to live out like the fantasy of a benevolent good God who helps me and like makes an impact in my life. You know what I mean? Like, it's their stories maybe about something else. The God thing is more of almost a secondary or a B plot kind of a thing, right? It's not like the central tension of their character.
Totally.
And that can be super fun. It's just like, oh yeah, this is just like, then you get to kind of explore what it's like in a world where there are benevolent gods who care about us and, like, you know, they want to help. Like, how do they show up? Right. And so it all depends on the character too. Like, what is the story that they want to tell with their divinity? And then, you know, that's up to you as the DM to decide. Like, if in your world, right, you want gods who are like, you know, for example, in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, there are gods, and they're like, they're singularly like purposed, right? Like, the gods are like ruin, right? Preservation. Like, they are singular in their desire almost. And that's for all kinds of reasons. But like, preservation, it will act on that premise. Like, they will never ruin. They can't. Right. It's anathema to the, like, they are a manifestation of like a principle, right? So like, that's, if that's your setting, like, you need to communicate that with the player, right? Be like, well, the player's like, but I want to change them. And it's like, okay, in this setting, right, in this game, like, that's just not possible in the tone that I'm going for in this setting. So like, we need to talk about, you know, what else you might want to do or whatever, right? But, you know, it all goes back to communication and, like, you know, the way that you portray the god and the relationship between the god and the PC ultimately should reflect the, you know, it should live in the circle of the center of the Venn diagram between your player's wishes and the verisimilitude of the setting that you've set up. It should exist right in the middle there. Because, you know, as a DM, like, this is a big one, you know, that this is, I feel like, a piece of a broader conversation, which is about, like, a lot of DMs, right? When you go on, like, DM's Guild or, you know, Ask Behind the Screen or any of these big Reddits, and you talk to DMs, they're like, my player wants to do this thing. It doesn't jive with my setting. Right? It doesn't jive with the story I want to tell. And you hear that a lot, right? Common, comes up a lot. It's very common. And so, you know, that's where, like, people get to, like, and, you know, it's in many ways, right? Maybe this is a hot take, but I'm like, as a DM, it is your job as best you can to try to make sure that, you know, your players are having fun at the table. But you have, like, you got to put yourself first a little bit in that because like, ultimately, like, if you're the GM and you're not vibing with what you're doing, like, it's going to be miserable for everybody. You're just not going to do it. Like, it's going to suck. Like, you're not going to want to write anything. And then when you get there, you're going to be miserable while you're DMing. Becomes a chore, right? It becomes a chore. This is where DM burnout comes in, where you're like, because you're constantly dealing with the cognitive dissonance of, like, well, this was what I wanted to do, but now I'm subverting my own desires in favor of somebody else's.
I'm, like, becoming a vehicle of this, like, player who wants to tell their own story.
And that's not fun. That's really not fun. So, like, you kind of have to honor, like, if you as the DM have set out, and that's where, again, it just all boils down to, like, the session zero and those early expectations. And like, you know, if someone's like, if you're a DM and you're like, I want to play an insane, really high stakes, very risky, grim, dark, gothic horror where you guys very well might die.
Tell me more.
Right? Yeah. Like, if you're like, that's the tone I want to tell. And someone is like, but I want to shit rainbows and sunshine. And it's like, you can do that.
Right.
Maybe this character is a spot of sunshine in another way, very dark and terrible world. And that could be a really interesting story. But if they're like, but I want to, you know, I want to if you're like, I want to play Elden Ring and they want to play Stardew Valley, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, those are not the same. Like,
No, different. They're different.
and you're like, yeah, but I'm the game dev and I'm making Elden Ring.
right.
So like,
so you can
get
do
on
your,
board.
You can do your Stardew Valley mod,
Yeah.
but like there's still monsters
Yeah.
that are gonna destroy your crops.
yeah, I'm sorry, they're gonna eat everything. There's a monster that vanishes into a swarm of locusts and it
Yeah.
eats everything, like because fuck you. That's why. But yeah, I mean that's like a fundamental.
You're
premise.
gonna have to trade with the pot men who are made of decomposing bodies on the inside,
Yeah.
and they're blissfully unaware of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just the deal. It's
This
just
is what I made. You know, this is the cake I've made. You can eat it or you can leave. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Somebody brought up to me. I'm gonna loop back.
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the-
I'm
we
always
we have a
on
clip we're gonna
tangents.
show. No, I love everything you've said has been amazing. But somebody brought up to me at Gen Con this concept of like noble dark, because for those who don't know,
Yeah.
I like grim dark stuff.
Yes.
I'm a very like gothic horror kind of person, which is interesting because I'm not like a super horror guy in overall. I
Yeah.
just really like a certain aesthetic. And I
Yeah.
like sort of like high stakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I like romance and spooky things, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's like a very like kind of niche slice of these things that I relish.
Yeah.
But somebody was like, have you ever heard of Noble Dark? And I hadn't heard of it, and maybe it's not even a real thing. I didn't ever look it up afterward.
don't
But they
know.
were like, instead of the world being grim and the characters all being grim, the world is grim and the characters are all like heroic. And I was like, that's interesting, but like that doesn't strike me as any different, because I'm never going to tell my players whether or not they're heroic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, here's the setting. What do you want to do in
Yeah.
there? You know what I mean? Like, what, and like, if they are shitting rainbows or whatever,
Yeah.
I might be like, here's the context in which rainbows can be shitted.
Yeah. Can be
Shat,
shitted.
can be shat.
Yes.
Here's the context in which rainbows can be shat.
Yeah.
And this is all I can give you.
Yeah.
Is that gonna work?
Is that enough?
Or is there something else you want to do?
Yeah.
Right. And maybe it's just not a good fit or
Yeah.
whatever. But like usually I'm pretty good at collaborating.
Yeah.
Like Mayana is a person who loves cute stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's just like one of her, and like so I love
She's
that.
a delightful person.
And she's
So, yeah.
she does
And her
shit.
characters
she
are
shits
delightful.
rainbows. I don't know.
Yeah,
exactly.
she really does, dude.
That's-
Being next to her, I'm always like, like there's something about like,
100%.
playing with Mayana where I'm just like,
No, it's just nice to be here.
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell why.
until she turns.
Until she does some stuff. But that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Is Solana's magic is literal butterflies.
Yeah.
Like she casts spells that manifest as like little cute butterflies and
Yeah.
stuff. And they give little kisses and that's how they heal
Yeah.
you. And then Solana herself does some messed up stuff.
Yeah.
And so like that to me is like awesome.
Awesome. Yes.
It's
yes.
great.
That is I mean, that's the juxtaposition that's really fascinating,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
really, really fun, where
Yeah.
you get this like this weird, you get these interesting dichotomies, and that's like interesting and fascinating characters, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so yeah, you end up with like, and again, that all comes down to, you know, here's the context in which that works. Like we've always joked that like the KTU crew, right, is like Monster Mash and Solana. You know what I mean? Like because it's like you've got the Abominable Snowman, right? Or what is she? She's
she's like Frankenstein's bride.
yeah, she's
sort of.
Frankenstein's
Yeah,
bride,
yeah.
right? And then you've got
Dracula.
Dracula's me
Yeah,
is Kane. You've got what was Culkin again? He's
Colgan is Wolfman.
Oh yeah, Colgan's Wolfman.
Naturally.
You got Creature from the Black Lagoon with.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, can't say shit. And then you've got, and then Wilkes is what's Wilkes?
What did we decide Wilkes was? He had something.
Yeah, he was a monster too. And then
Yeah.
there's like Solana, who's just
Who's
like,
just like-
yeah, her magic looks like butterflies.
Yeah, exactly,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. But
And
she's
so-
kind of her own huntsman now.
yeah,
Something
right.
like that.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, maybe
there you go.
Solana, right? That's Solana's monster. But that's fascinating, but also that's always fun. Like group composition and party dynamics are always fun because it's like you have that kind of range, and then it's fun to see when they swap roles.
Yeah.
Right. Like sometimes
Oh,
this
yeah.
person can be very light and funny in instances, and then the light funny person gets to go dark. Right.
And that's such an opportunity, such a joy. To
And
see.
it makes it hit, man.
Yeah.
When the normal spot of sunshine is down, it hits you. It hits you real hard.
Yeah.
Which is, and again, that just like it goes back to like earning it, right? Like
Yeah.
if somebody's like morose and dour all the time, that's not necessary. Like if they're morose and dour all the time, but then their moments of unbridled joy become really beautiful, right? So it's like, and again, you get to play with that and kind of paint those strokes. But anyway, geez.
But in that vein, the like, I feel like in that crew, and you and I have more conversations to have about this, but like, we do. Kane and Culkin both worship Eldorian.
Yes.
And you and I have just had a real fun time creating Eldoria's aspects and stuff and finding these different ways that Eldoria is. But both of them, they have such specific relationships with her. And I'm like, feel like, and you can tell me if I'm off base, but like Kane's relationship with Eldoria is much more of sort of the latter version we talked about, where it's this kind of distant thing.
Yes.
Where he's like, this is my sort of like guiding beacon, and then I do my shit, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like Culkin has this much more like hands-on relationship where it's this like presence in his society and stuff, and this like thing he has to like wrestle,
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, because in the AOR, right, there are two clerics, one very much like a cleric, right, who has manifested, and then Seeker, we got to see kind of at the tail end of the campaign his like sort of reunion with it, right, but it manifested very differently, and he didn't get nearly the sort of like level of personal involvement that Kellic did, because again, like, Kellic had done this work and that's the consequence of like pure classing cleric.
It was his sole interest.
Right. It was his sole interest. And then you had Seeker, who was like this kind of thing. And I was like, okay, well, these two things as a DM, these two things get different treatment, right? Like I remember, and we had this conversation, because I do remember when I came in, the opportunity to introduce, I was like, well, Famir is not going to show up in Oakengate because Oakengate is so closely tied to Lauris.
It's Lauris'.
So, but I felt kind of guilty about it as a GM, because I was like, I came in and Rodney, who, has a Seeker, who has really not expressed any divine anything, right, got this kind of like reward in the form of like an angelic harbinger.
Interesting.
And I felt kind of guilty about that as a GM, because I was like, fuck, like, but I was also like, but like, it would be odd to me in that early stage, like in this space, right, like where there is a holy relic, an artifact of Lauris,
the Bright Wall,
right, in the form of the Bright Wall, it would be odd if it was not Lauris, and so that, and then I think I had a conversation with you, which was like, that kind of went on longer and longer, and I think it was because I was intimidated by it. I was afraid to fuck it up, basically, because again, there was a lot of interesting dynamics with like me coming in as a GM halfway through, and really not having been there for that initial character creation process, and wanting to like learn more about Kellic and play with you a little bit more to understand like what your desires were. And I remember, I think the clip we're gonna watch.
You're setting us up.
I am trying. But then, right, we had a conversation where I think you never approached me, but I was like, I know I owe you like some time, some FaceTime. Like, I was like, I wanted to happen. And then I was like, and I forget what I said, but eventually I just admitted, I was like, yeah, for some reason I'm a little intimidated by it. I'm intimidated by her. I'm intimidated by the interaction. Yeah. And then you were just like, dude, I trust you. Like, I totally trust you.
Hell yeah.
And so I was like, okay.
Hell yeah, dude.
And then like a few episodes later, we found this moment, right?
This little...
which again gave me like, I was like, okay, cool. Now I have like a narrative in-game justification for why this is happening now. Right. Because I'd kind of done some other setup and architecting. Because I also was like, well, does Famir come in after Artemisia immediately? Right. And I was like, well, that would be... I just didn't want to throw too... It felt like it was whiplash. It would pile too much on. So anyway, so that kind of... And this scene was the result of, again, like an element of communication between you and I, where, we just got to do it.
Look at you and your divine hair, too.
And you see, as this feminine form bends down and reaches her hand towards you. For too long, I have left you unanswered, my child.
Her faces.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right.
I'll reach my hand up.
Which hand?
My charred, burnt hand.
Oh,
yeah. Such a
Everything
choice.
falls away. Something takes shape on the horizon. You see a horizon. You see a vast blue curve. You see land spread out beneath you as you sit above Above the world of Elbor, the stars like a tapestry behind you, and before you, floating, both all-encompassing and somehow so intimate at once. See her. And she reaches up a hand, and she brushes it across your face. For too long, I have left you unanswered. And I know you have learned the truth. I know you have questions. Ask them of me, and I will answer where I can.
Rebecca's face is so
She's
awesome.
always the best, right?
No, and like I when I was cutting, so there's a version of this that's a TikTok of ours, and you're like this vast blue curve, and for some reason, like when I was like trimming it down to like a minute or whatever, I was like, I can't lose that. I love the vast blue because something about it, I was like, oh, yeah, it's so beautiful. And like, there's something about playing a cleric where, for me anyway, especially because like Kellick's whole design was like he for 30 some years of his life was like obsessed with Famir. Was like Famir's number one guy. Like I ride or die with this god. And so it's like every time, like when Ethan first had her appear at the temple in Saddle Mount, maybe?
Was it Saddle Mount?
I don't recall, but it was
like didn't she like appear in an old lady?
Yeah, there was like an old woman praying next to me, and it turned and it was Famir. I like started crying right away just because like Kellick is so much like, oh my god, it's you, like it's your, and there's something so like, from a player's perspective, just like satisfying about that, or just like thrilling to me in a way. I don't really get like, I get starstruck certainly in the sense that I like have my heart will beat fast or something if I'm like, you know, or if I'm talking to somebody that I like really like the work of or something like that, and but I'll try to be really cool. My heart will be racing,
totally normal reaction.
But I never do the thing of like seeing the Beatles and I'm weeping all the time, right? You know, like that's never been something that like I'm way too much like Shane, keep your shit together to do that, right? But like playing this character, it's like he can't. He can't keep his shit together. This is his goddess, you know? And so so you coming in with this such a beautiful presentation of her and of her like energy, and I just so easy to weep because it's just like, oh my god. Famir.
Well, and I wanted her, you know, like you had done all of this work, right, of like setting up her traditions and like, you know, like the kind of goddess whose worshipers use the, you know, may the light reflect from your eyes. Like, I was like, who is that person, right? Who inspires that in a populace? And I'm like, that is a, and like I remember, you know, in the early when I first got it, I was like, you know, I asked Ethan, I was like, are any, like, who's bad though? Like, because I needed to make some decisions. Right. I was like, they can't all be good. Right. And Ethan had never, it was almost this thing of like, you know, he kind of wanted to explore this theme of like, there were no bad guys. And I was like, I hear you. Right. And I appreciate that effort to like make this like, you know, muddy the water a little bit and explore those themes of like, in a war, right, which is the backdrop of this whole thing. Like, are there, you know, who's the bad guy, right? And it's like, sometimes we know that can be like, I mean, sometimes it's pretty fucking clear. Other times, like, it's just like, oh God, these are people operate with the information they have, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, that to me I was like, I got to decide somebody's not great. You know what I mean? Somebody's less than stellar. And and based on Famir, right, and the work that you had done and like all the stuff that I'd read about her that you had made, I was like, it's not her. I just couldn't, I don't know why, but like to me, and I don't know, maybe you thought of it different when you first conceived of her.
Well, I mean, like, I'm curious about that, actually. I did so much writing, especially in the earlier phases of this campaign, of just like different sort of like thoughts and different prayers that Kellick might be doing amidst all of this stuff. You know, internal monologue. Like, and I wrote one where he was like, I may have to kill Famir in order to save Elbor. Like that was like something, and it was before we'd even done any of the reveals. It was just like, I can see palpably as we go on these journeys that the world is suffering because of the war between the gods.
Right.
And for the war to end, somebody's got to lose.
Yeah.
I can see that the old gods are losing.
Yeah.
So like if I could somehow end them, I could bring peace to Elbor.
Yeah.
Like that was like an element of like Kellick's whole journey.
Yeah.
And like there's even Ulma and Kellick have a conversation in like it's got Barry in the name, like Westbury or Eastbury or something like that.
Westbury, I think.
Yeah, Westbury, where we're like, maybe we just have to kill the gods.
I do
and
remember
like
this,
Ulma kind of mentions it, and Kellick's like, you know, I've heard crazier suggestions in this time, and it's like this whole thing of like, has this guy who cries at the sight of this goddess reconcile those things, and you know. It was a hairy campaign for that because I think Ethan, and for what it's worth, I think I like pushed Ethan in our live sessions. I think Ethan might have come in strong with a thing, and then I might have like changed his mind because I'm so persuasive.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, you are.
Because Kellick would just be like, nah, fuck that. And poor Ethan was just trying to like do right by everybody. And I think like there were some elements of that in where we ended up turning things and stuff. And these kind of the things we've talked about where the story changes as you go through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, yeah, you did have to come in and make some, especially because once you're getting to the end of the story, certain things become resolute.
Yeah.
They just do.
Yeah.
Because you have to come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
And it can't, and it will hopefully be satisfying.
Yeah. And that was the thing, right? Was like the satisfying part of like, it's like, well, in order to kind of like honor a lot of this work that has been done, again, going back to a conversation we had, in the co-DMing episode, was like, you know, you're also kind of co-DMing alongside your players. Like, you want their decisions and the things that they do to matter. And like, you had done all this world building. And I know like that was a consideration in this question of like, why are they losing, right? Like, why are they holding on?
Yeah.
And I personally wanted to reconcile, like, why are they holding on with, they have to be good. So like, or like at least Famir, right? I was like, I wanted Famir to be good. And also like, there was a lot of other design things that I made because I was like, well, in order for the cyclical nature of Elbor to work, right? Like it meant that basically it alternated between benevolent deities who saved the world from some threat and then like self-serving assholes who were like, we want the power. Yeah. And then they would do terrible things. Yeah. And so like it kind of, and I was like, well, these guys, like the old gods made a good world. Like they made a world that was beautiful in so many respects. Right. And so I was like, would they be bad? Right. And again, and I think in this instance, right, it was like the story we're telling now, right, was that in this instance, no one was either all good or all bad. Yeah. Right. But there were a couple of very selfish actors in the new gods. Yeah. Edriel, namely, and then a couple of others. Yeah. Who, you know, had ulterior motives for their ascension. Right. Versus, you know, and then like. And also, like, getting Divinity changed, right, them, I think, in many ways. It altered them. Yeah. So there were some conceits. But
Which I think, for what it's worth, like, and this is something that I always have to wrestle with because it's so easy for me. Maybe I'm just this arrogant, but, like, I'm always like, my idea is so cool and I'm so excited about my idea. And then when I have to have an argument with someone about it and then, like, come to a new idea, like, there is an impulse, like when you compromise, I guess this is the easiest way to say it. When you compromise, there's a reason sometimes compromise is used as like a pejorative of like you compromise your ethics or something like that, right? Yes. But like when you're compromising with someone, it can feel like you're losing something. Yes. But in D&D and when you're working with people who are fucking geniuses, like you find the better thing, right? Like a new, cooler idea can come from it. And I think, you know, I'd be curious to hear how you feel about this, but I think there's like something really cool about this idea that like the old gods had some stuff not go the way they intended, or, you know, they didn't, like they had some oversight. You know, it didn't work out great for them at the end, but they were good and their intentions were good and they're still trying to be good. Yeah. And then the new gods, some of them meant well and some of them maybe didn't, right? And then there's like room for that nuance, and then you create this like confrontation at the end of the campaign where that all kind of plays out in these different ways, and now we get to sort of see in Varestra like what's going on with all that, right? Like which is really thrilling to me. Oh no, absolutely. And like, well, and that was another thing, right? Is like I remember
once again, it was kind of a thing, right? And this circles back to like the broader theme of this conversation, right? Like, not only did we have a very, in the form of Kellic, we had this PC who was very, very about, divinity and Elbor.
Yeah.
So I had that like condition that I really wanted to like, again, honor and satisfy.
Yeah.
But I also had the broader world element that was like, this is a war-torn, a world that is being ravaged by a war between ideologies, right? And it wasn't necessarily that the gods themselves were fighting, but it was that people were fighting on their behalf, right? Which again is a whole nother bag of cats to open up, right? Which is like, how the difference between like what gods might say and the way that their will is made manifest by their worshipers, right? Like, I don't think Famir was jiving with a lot of the shit that happened during the fall, right? Like, she was like, oh God, but also she was very discombobulated and was still not sure where the lines of her power was, and couldn't intervene directly.
Whether it was safe too.
Whether it was safe.
Maybe if she steps out, then that's when Adriel gets her and takes her out.
They had to like hide. They went into hiding, basically.
Because it was also like the old gods. Like, for the first half of the campaign, we just thought they were dead.
Yeah.
Like, we were like, are they even alive or not? But like, there's still power coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? So,
well, and that was
when
I was like, well, if the power's still alive, they're still alive. They have to be, right? I was like, okay. And then again, right, you kind of have to build backwards and forwards at the same time, and particularly taking it over. I was like, okay, well, if they're still alive, right? And I was like, if they, and also, right, there was this whole thing. I was like, if they are good, which like evidence would suggest that they at least had good intentions. Yeah. Why would they not just give up?
Right.
Right. And I was like, and then I was like, it has to be that there is a bigger risk if they give up.
Right.
Right. Like, I was like, that's the only thing that I can wrap my brain around that would make it like, good people would only hold on and abide this much suffering if there was something way worse. Right. If there was a worse alternative, right, which was Basranath. Yeah. And then that's a lot of where the Divine Covenant and the whole nature and like the cosmological rules that we established really around the way that it worked, why it worked the way that it worked, and why it forced a lot of these conditions. And then, and then hopefully in the process, as I came in, I was like, okay, well, I want to include them more and start seeding these ideas that they are interfering and involved and present. Yeah. So that at the end, when we kind of when we get this idea of like, oh, like, new gods, there were 3 who were maybe a little more self-serving and did it and then 2 who were changed, maybe either started with an idea and then were changed by what happened to them and then changed by, right, the involvement of a certain cleric of particular renown. And then, right, and then the old gods and so like, and then how that confrontation happens at the end. And why none of them, right, could. Right. 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 Could do what the AOR ultimately had to do. Mm-hmm. One, because like the old gods couldn't do it because like if round 2 had like that would have been round 2 fight out of the gate done right because Vasranath was like I remember you motherfuckers like you locked me in this cage the last time and the new gods right they wouldn't have because of their selfishness they wouldn't have done what the AOR did right because to do so would have been to lose their power so that I was like how do I make this fucking win condition work in a way that makes again that like at least follows some form of logical consistency. And I think it worked out.
I think it's a cool it stands to reason and I think like it stands to reason that Divinity changes you. Yes. And so I think there is some like creative wiggle room there, right? In terms of like how whether or not they're good people at a certain point. Because like the other element of it is like if they are mortals, right, at some point, then they contain multitudes. And like and I plan on exploring this and we'll see how it all pans out. But like Ildoria has like a bunch of multitudes. Yeah.
She has multitudes of multitudes.
She contains multitudes, and some of them are not so nice. No, right? Like are kind of intense, and I think that's like a really fecund like place playground, playground. Thank you. Yeah, of just like, ooh, we could do all kinds of stuff here.
That was another one, right? Like Ilduria, and then I think we got to get our companion in here. But like, I remember trying to figure out, right? Like Ilduria, I was like, because nature, I was like, nature is such a fascinating domain for me because I'm like, nature's a bitch.
It's
it's not great,
too,
and it's also
yeah.
a massive domain, right? Like, like for me, like light and life, I'm like, okay, like I got that, but like nature, I'm like, there are so many elements of nature. Like nature is, birth and rejuvenation and cultivation and all of these like beautiful elements of like sowing seeds and reaping and sowing and planting and flowers. Yeah. It's also hurricanes and volcano eruptions and flash floods and predation. Yeah. Right. And like just the brutality of nature. I follow an Instagram page called Nature is Metal, and it's just crazy shit that you see in nature. Like, like it's crazy. And so like the huntress, the element that Cain worships, and I wanted to like circle this all back if I can. You spoke earlier like Cain and Culkin. It's another interesting dynamic where you have two characters whose divinity and relationship with divinity manifests very differently. Like I feel like to Culkin, it's very central to who he is. Yeah. Whereas with Cain worships that aspect of Ilduria because he sees his own nature reflected in the huntress. Yeah. That element of like predation and the hunt and that intensity. Yeah. But he doesn't like. That's a kind of just, again, that's like a part of his identity, but it's not his central tension. Yeah. Right. And I want
like his. Visually, it's like behind him, whereas Culkin's is in front of him. Yes. Like if that makes sense.
I know. 100%. That's exactly right. Yeah. That is exactly right. Like Cain's is a backdrop to who he is. Yeah. Culkin's is like this is a very important component.
It's an active
which is funny because Cain's a paladin and Culkin's a druid.
Well, they're both very religious. Yes. Right? There's still like a religiosity there at the center of their lives. It's just like it takes a different flavor. Yeah.
And that's really fun, and that's the whole point of exploring it.
That's really spooky.
But speaking of, I think
there's that creepy little claw that just reached okay, Nosferatu.
But I feel like we've talked at length about this, but we have we're going to be joined. Oh my God, that is horrible! Like just your hand with the black nails.
This one was really hard.
Okay.
This one was difficult to find.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
so for if anybody hasn't, if this is for some reason the first episode you clicked on, Rebecca's going to give us a horror story or an AITA.
Yeah.
This is a horror story.
Horror story.
Of some variation of forcing religious themes into D&D.
Cool. All right. It doesn't. I think the problem is if this isn't a good prompt, Seth and I will have nothing to say.
Yeah.
As we so often.
Clearly, we really need a lot of encouragement.
We need a lot of help to have
So yeah, I know you guys mostly talked about when you talk.
We talked about everything.
Okay, well,
so you're good.
I know you mostly were talking. I know this was mostly about.
We tried to keep it on track.
Bringing NPC gods into sessions, and hopefully in a positive way. Yes. This is a not so positive.
I know.
Because it's a horror story. And the title is, this is from 2 years ago.
2 years ago, okay.
Okay.
DM is trying to subtly reconvert me to Christianity through plot points.
Oh boy. Reconvert me to Christianity. So you've been this is your second
Christian. No, so this is an ex-Christian.
Ex-Christian.
And they're being through the satanic panic game, they're gonna be brought back to Christ.
What's funny though is like reconvert implies
they were converted
once already. So it's like I wasn't a Christian, I converted, I stopped, and now I'm reconverted.
She's my second cousin, twice converted.
Yeah. Like what? Anyway. Sorry, just my own particular
no
linguistical beef to pick with the wording of this. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
I will. I deconstructed my faith, but don't have much against anyone else holding to theirs. Shortly after leaving my job and life at church, I found a D&D group with someone I met through church. It's been a solid home for me despite being unsure of who my real friends are. The group is really cool, and I like the DM, but he's not so subtly putting my character through plot points in his campaign that reek of Christianity. Scales weighing my good and evil deeds in the afterlife, being lost and in need of being found, making a pact with the god of fate, etc. I've tried role-playing my character's own atheism into it, having him act in defiance of such holy fates, but it's a strange feeling that no matter what I do going forward, the story will lead my character to some corny Jesus versus Satan realization. I was honest with him upon joining that I don't believe in God anymore, and I didn't mind these little things at first. But now they're starting to bug me because it all feels quite intentional. Not sure what to do. I enjoy the campaign and my new friends in the group quite a bit, but I don't like the confrontation that comes along with voicing my displeasure at this type of not so subtle evangelism.
Hey.
That's a good word.
It's missing an
It is.
E-N. It's missing another N here. So it's not me.
You blew it, OP.
Yeah.
It's the OP's fault.
How dare you make Rebecca look bad?
How dare you?
To hell! I'm just kidding.
Damn you.
Straight to hell. Instead of straight to
No,
jail, straight
they
to hell.
deconstructed their face.
They did.
Is that the end of it?
That's the end.
Okay.
All right. I mean, yeah, man, that's a tough one.
Evangelism. The end.
Nice.
It goes into like, you know, I feel like this is an interesting expansion of some of the topics that we said, which is like, again, the whole interest of like gods in D&D is like, what does the PC and the player want that relationship to look like? And so it's like, you know, if you're like, hey, I'm an atheist and I have no interest in exploring divinity in D&D, it's like, cool. I mean, there is the weird element, right, of like, I've heard this before, and I think it's a point that to me makes sense, right? Is like in D&D, in most settings, the gods are definitively real, right? They are definitively real.
Yeah.
They make real impact, like they perform miracles, right? They do all the things that that gods, if they're real, do.
Right. That's very well
Maybe
said.
see where I land on this subject. I don't know. Anyway, but sorry. See, speaking of injecting your own personal beliefs,
Sure, yeah.
but
yeah.
no. So, like in D&D, in the context of D&D, gods are very real. So, playing an atheist in the context of D&D honestly doesn't make sense.
It's a little silly.
It's a
yeah,
little silly
yeah.
because it's like, well, the conceit of the world is that they're
Is
very
that
real,
they're real, and it's like
undeniable.
Yeah, it's like, well, you know, maybe this is, but it's like being a flat earther or something where it's just like, well, but it's obvious you're wrong.
Yeah,
right?
it's okay. You can shame flat earthers in my company.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
okay, it's like, guys, the Greeks figured this out like fucking 8,000 years ago.
They did not need to go
sticks
into
and strings.
space.
They didn't even need to see it.
Just
They
looking
figured
at
it out.
shadows, they made clocks.
Yeah, for fuck's sake.
That worked.
I mean,
around
if
this concept.
there are actual devils and
Yeah.
demons in your world,
Yeah.
And they
there
like
should
show
also
up
be
and
gods.
eat people. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
devils
I-
show up and like do crazy stuff.
But I think the OP is specifically referring to there
Yes.
being one ultimate God and one
Yeah.
ultimate
well, they're
evil.
describing this sort of like, Jesus versus Satan paradigm, which I'm
Yeah.
not sure exactly how that manifests, you
Yeah.
know? But I do think I think there's a difference between playing a character, well, and also just being like, I don't feel like exploring the themes of religiousness,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That's really important.
That's a very
and that's something your
important distinction.
DM should be sensitive to, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they know you from like a church context and you're
Yeah.
like, I'm excommunicated,
Yeah.
not actually, but
Right.
you're removing yourself from it. That's something where you want to be like, hey man, like we're friends. Like I want you to respect that about like that has changed, but I still love you as a friend.
Absolutely.
So like, can we not do that with
Yeah.
this?
Gods are real in the context of D&D. Your PC is under no obligation to have any relationship to them whatsoever if you don't want to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I think with the exception of like, I mean, it just depends on like what your main story is about, which is another thing where it's like you want everybody to be in agreement on that. Because like with Elbor, right,
Yeah.
with our campaign one's arc, you have to have some kind of relationship with the gods, at least, or some kind of opinion about it or whatever. That was something that like when I did MCOR, I was like, all I really need from y'all is for you to have an opinion on the war because we're gonna do war stuff.
Yes.
So like decide whose side you're on in the war. Like and that was like you have to try to establish those grounds. So if it's a religious like campaign like thrust, then like you're SOL, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Without more information, it's hard to kind of tell exactly what the OP means by the Satan versus Jesus situation.
That's, I mean, ultimately, I mean, I guess the horror story there is yeah, you're being like kind of forced to engage in a level of role play that is eerily similar to and aligned with, and seems to have this like overture of evangelicalism or evangelism rather in terms of the DM, which is like, and especially if they've mentioned it. Yeah. Right? Like if you've like flat out said, which is what OP said they did, then it's like
you're being a dick.
Yeah, now you're just being an asshole.
Now you're being a dick.
And like the thing that, oh man, this rankles me in general about like just proselytizing and evangelism in general is like this idea that like because you're trying to save them or whatever, like your attempts at it can ignore their like you know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, but I'm trying to save you. It's like, yeah, but I don't want you to. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, but I'm trying to save you. So like there's this idea that you're acting from this place of benevolence. Yeah. That to me is like very arrogant. Because it's like, hey, I don't want you to though. Yeah. But like, you know, but it's like, but I'm trying to save you. It's for your own good. And that's where you get into some really maybe broader than the context.
It can be like it's a whole other subject, and we'll get into it but so I'll only touch on this because I think this is probably like 3 episodes or something like that.
This is like a whole podcast.
100%. But like as a DM, you are creating a world.
Yes.
And that world will reflect your vision of how things work and how people are. You know, like, and how like basically how the world is, right? Because you're going to create it after like the way you think things go.
Yeah, you view it through your own lens.
Yeah, and so it's like you have to create something that squares up with your players, and that requires that you guys have some what's the word I'm looking for? Like worldviews that align. Yeah. You know, like some kind of some places where they meet at least, right? Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 1-to-1. Yeah. It just has to be compatible. That's the word I was like, compatible worldviews, right? Where it's like, okay, maybe we have disagreements with like how effective taxation is or something like that. You know what I mean? But like on the whole, we're like democracy is a pretty good model. Or, you know what I mean?
Right.
Something like
it's
that.
We got.
It's the best we got, right? Yeah. So like, you know, we're all kind of in favor of that, and maybe we have different feelings about the like intricacies of that, and like that. Maybe that's something we can explore.
Right. That might be a theme of a campaign.
We have carte blanche to sort of test those things out. Like every D&D group is effectively a city council. Yeah. Right. Like, but when it's like gods and stuff, like you do have to have some kind of like baseline of like, this is what this like is fundamentally. Well, because you decide if there's gravity. Yeah. Like you're the DM.
And OP is saying, hey, this is a theme I'm not really interested in exploring.
So find one that's more compatible.
But also, it's like that's kind of like a lines and veils thing, right? It's like this is a person saying, "Hey, I'm not interested in bringing this into my fantasy world." Yeah, and the DM just isn't listening.
Is not listening.
Even you could even say maybe the DM isn't trying to do that, but the OP is fairly sensitive to those topics because of their recent things. So that is why lines and veils exist. Yeah. And this person is saying, hey, that is a line and veil for me. So let's just avoid it. And so I can understand why that would be a horror story for this OP to say, hey, this is my my boundary being crossed.
Yeah. I mean, like replace. Right, like I was thinking the same thing. It's like replace, you know, these efforts towards like this, you know, not so subtly or these very overt attempts at evangelism. Replace that with like overt, you know, themes of like sexuality that you don't want to explore,
or violence,
violence, or any other theme that would like normally be, you know, whatever,
or like self-harm.
Like there are so like if you just replace any of those with this, like it's very quickly, it's like. Obviously, it's like
exactly
that is a hard nope. Yeah. But again, there's like that weird context where it's like, you know, there's that tendency to believe that it's like somehow for the person's good, but it's like I'm not saying that I agree with it at all. I don't. I think it's like hard stop. They said don't do it. Don't do it.
Right.
But that is the complexity around
of this particular
like evangelicalism.
Topic. Yeah. Like this very particular topic. If you swap it out for any of these other things that we just talked about, it's very black and white, clear. Yeah. But then there's like that weird element
because
of like
the person might be thinking that it's the right thing to do.
They're like doing
like a moral obligation that they
They have to save your soul.
I will say,
soul, though.
I've always found this fascinating, and then we can button it up. But like, there was this girl in college that I was so in love with, and we had a late night. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, it's just true.
We kill her.
We killed her. I was so in love with her, and she was very religious. And we had this or she was like post-religious, where she was like had a religious upbringing, but now we were in college, and so she was like figuring all of that out. And we're having this conversation where I talked about my complete lack of faith in anything, and she was like, I think if people are religious at all, they should be evangelical, because like if you believe that people are going to go to hell for not believing in the thing, why wouldn't you do everything in your power to save those people? Right. Like we're like, what, like you should be an asshole because you're trying to save them from hell. So I was like, that's fascinating. Yeah. Because if you believe that, then of course you're going to be the worst.
Yeah.
Like,
everyone's like, no, Shane, it's okay. You can go to hell.
Yeah, that's right. That was her perspective as well. She was like, you
go right. You just march your heavy ass right on down there, buddy.
But yeah, so like, I completely think in this scenario, OP should either find a way to have these hard conversations with the DM and find this common ground.
It unequivocally clear.
Make it, set that boundary and maintain it. And if it gets crossed, get the fuck out. Yeah, it's done, right? Like it's that ship sailed and it's like, it's too bad, but that's life. But in some weird part of my brain, I'm like, I get it. I understand why you would be obdurate about that, right? Like,
well, that's why this particular topic is like weirdly complex because it's not something that like, again, there's that element of like good intent, right?
Exactly.
That they believe.
It's slightly more respectable than if you were doing like romance when romance wasn't a cool thing, or like parent death,
or like parent death, or sexual violence, or sexuality, or like again,
or like
harm
for children,
harm to children, like any. There are so many
animals,
things that could that could, if you just swap it out, it's like becomes very clear. But this one's weird. Yeah. But that being said, like
same rules still apply.
That being said, the same rules still apply because ultimately this is about like personal boundaries, right, and just like respecting one another's desires.
We're playing a fantasy game, and you don't need to bring like you leave your personal.
You have so much power as a storyteller to glaze over the stuff that's going to be uncomfortable. Yeah, you can still even have it be a part of your world. You can just like move past it.
You move past it.
Fade to black.
You allow the players who want to engage with it to engage with it. Yeah, in that sense, right? This theme is also weird, interesting because it's like, if another player engages in it, to the OP's point, like I don't care about other people if they have their faith. If another player is engaging with it and having their moments, that's cool. Like I DM'd for a table where one person is very religious and has a very like deep and personal relationship with God, and they're playing a cleric, and so like their fantasy was just like, I just want to be buddies with God. Yeah, and I was like, cool, I got you. You know what I mean? But like
you are buddies with God.
You are buddies with God. Right?
Well, lucky you.
Yes, and he like. That God shows up for him all the time. He like answers his auguries and like all the time, just like, yep, here you,
bud.
Yeah, they were pals basically. Yeah, what you doing down there?
I'm here for you.
But like he wanted that. But like there were other players at the table that I knew for a fact are atheists, right? or at the very least staunch agnostics. But like that bit of the game is not for them, and I'm not going to force them to do it, right? And this theme is interesting in that respect because there is that sort of like where like if there are some themes where if they're present at the table at all, they're present for like everyone kind of, and everyone's forced to engage with it. Yeah. But there was one other thing, like it's interesting, Faith, and then we can wrap up because it's late. But unless somebody else wants to say anything, but
no thoughts.
Want to leave space.
I'm done.
But this idea that like faith is a very interesting thing, and I remember reading this quote, and I don't remember where it is, but faith is by its very nature like. It is the belief in something without any sort of rational justification or evidence to support the premise. Yeah. Right? Like you just have faith in the thing because you have faith in the thing. And that it's circular, right? Like I don't need evidence. I don't need a rationale. I just believe it. No. And it's kind of this magic fairy dust that you sprinkle on anything and it just becomes suddenly kind of virtuous in the minds of a lot of people. Yeah. But like to me, a theme that I think is very interesting if you ever like want to explore it is that like what extremes can people be driven to, and we see this in the real world. What extremes can people be driven to when all they operate on is faith? Because under the rules of faith you don't have to have a justification. You just believe it. And so I got asked this question once by my mom who was like, why? Because in my younger
Shout out,
mom. I could be pretty hostile to religion, and I've since matured a little bit, and I have a different opinion of it. But I could get pretty aggressive in arguments. And she was like, why are you so hostile? And I was like, because like the underlying thing here is that I believe that it teaches you that that's okay.
Yeah.
It teaches you that it's okay to not need to justify the reasons behind what you're doing. And that's dangerous. I thought that was very dangerous. It's a very dangerous way to think.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you could just say anything.
Just go to war.
You just go to
You
war.
just go to war.
And elbow, right?
Because faith
because
says
faith
so.
demands it.
Yeah.
Because I shall do it because my faith demands it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you get into some really interesting territory there, and we see that.
Thank God that
right?
never happens.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh yeah,
Crazy.
thank God.
So that's why these themes are, and again, in that's why in D&D we get this opportunity where like faith has evidence, and thus, right, like those decisions, like because it's like, well, my faith is evident because they do shit. They're real. These are the acts that they do. These are and then you can weigh it and you can say, well, this God is in service to ideals that to me contribute to the net benefit of a society. Thus they're worth following. Yeah. Right.
Not for nothing. Like that was when Ethan was like, Famir can kind of be whatever you want. I was like, cool. She's going to be a God that I, Shane, could believe in.
Yes.
Like I was like, we're going to make it like principles that I actually like would hold to as a cleric. And then it became this really cool opportunity as somebody who doesn't have faith for me to like explore what that would be like, especially when everyone else in the party starts going, I don't really think these gods are up to much. And I'm like, no, they're great. I promise.
Yeah.
With this one especially is really good.
Yeah. Which in a way you kind of like, that was like you got to explore in this very sort of like, interesting and safe environment.
Yeah.
That sensation and that feeling. Because like I do, sometimes I envy people with faith. Like I do. It's like, God, how nice, right? God, how nice.
Yeah.
How nice to just like believe that with that fervor.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's a whole argument that Kellic and Thessaly have where they're like, I don't really see, where are they? Why aren't they anywhere? And Kellic's like, you're here. You know what I mean? Which is like such a like youth pastor thing to say.
Yeah.
But Kellic is so real. He's like, you're here doing the will of the God. Like we're doing the thing that Famir would want us to. And like, that's meaningful.
Well, it's not just youth pastorism though, because you have the power of the God. You've been blessed with it so that you can actually do something. It's not just this book that you're now teaching because rabbis are teachers, right? They're not like they don't speak to God, right? It's a very different in Judaism. It's a very different worldview. But they are teachers who are just like their job is to just tell you and help dissect the text. Whereas like a pastor.
Yeah.
Who the heck knows what they're doing?
Right.
But at the end of the day,
depends on which street corner.
But at the end of the day, they aren't what a cleric is. They can't heal. They can't. Well, I mean, unless you're speaking in tongues and, and
hard to argue against the veracity of God when this guy can show up and his arm lights on fire and then somebody's wounds are healed
and
or come back
can
from
put
the dead.
her hands on you and heal you. It's like that. So for your point, it's like you're here. You have her power. You have Famir's power. You have Fenra's power.
If she didn't exist, you wouldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's that's a clear.
But to me, it did give, despite that, because I do think that's 100%. That's where I fundamentally stand.
But
I do think like on some level, it did give me a little bit of more empathy for those who are like, I see God everywhere, because it's like, sure, like Kellic could.
That's what you're looking for.
Kellic could be like those people helping the people out of the burned building who don't have any magical powers whatsoever are still servants of Famir. Yeah. Like are still like doing her divine grace, and that's like something powerful,
And empathy, there's no such thing as, empathy is a thing that does us all good. Yeah. Right?
I think so. Yeah.
Ultimately, like if you can empathize with that point of view, right? And you can, and suddenly it like when you're able to do that, suddenly you're able to make sense of things, which just leads to more interesting conversations that you can have.
1000%.
Because you can be like, well, at least I can understand. Right. Like I get it. I get conceptually.
It doesn't. I can't really
resonate
go all
with
the way.
me. Yeah. Can't meet you all the way there, but I can meet you halfway.
But I can see it.
Yeah. Right. Or I see the path, so to speak. So
anyways, quit that D&D game.
Yeah. If they don't, if you have that conversation again, watch. She's like, oh no, I've converted back. And be like, shit. And then she's like, "You guys are gonna burn in hell."
Yeah.
Anyway, whoopsies.
So if you have a D&D horror story, or an a question about whether or not you're the asshole, please do send it in ventureforthdnd@gmail.com, and we'll maybe feature it. Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
We'll see how we feel.
Subject line: DM horror story, or excuse me, D&D horror story, or D&D AITA.
Yeah, and that's very, very comprehensive. I think we figured out religion in general.
Yeah, I think so. Each episode, we actually tackle a big world problem and solve it.
And then we solve it. That's actually what you're getting out of it. It's very edifying.
Yeah.
podcast
So
in
this
that way.
one was religion. Last week's was the dichotomy of good and evil.
First one was world building.
Yeah. First one was world.
Next
building.
week we'll do.
So it was our
world
first
hunger.
episode. Give us a break, all right? We needed a warm up. Next week is
world hunger.
Whatever. World hunger.
Yeah,
Peace.
we'll do nuclear
nuclear de-escalation or
de-escalation,
disarmament. God, dude, ever since I read that book. Anyway, that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah, with that, I guess.
Goodbye,
Bye, nerds.
You didn't name the thing. You didn't name the thing.
What do we need to name it? Oh, this has been what is it called? Mastering the game
With Seth
and Shane. And goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
I just like that it rhymes.
I do too. It's very lovely. It's lovely.